Well, good afternoon. I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to come and talk to you at this conference. It's been a very insightful conference. I'd like to thank the Navy League, the Asia Pacific Center for Studies, and particularly the Royal Canadian Navy for giving me the opportunity to come and talk to you today. I'd like to start off with perhaps a little different and more pragmatic tack. Could I ask our Royal Canadian Navy hosts, those who are on active duty, could please stand up for a moment and be recognized? And I would just ask, first off, that y'all join me in a round of applause for these folks who are taking on the maritime trade. I think there's at least one lieutenant in the back. And you know what lieutenants do during conferences like this when senior officers are present? They write down quotes. My favorite quote so far was from Harry Kim, who said that, "When I got to the shipyard, I found that there were too many meetings, and those had no value added." Does anybody have his business card? I'd like to work for him. We don't suffer from a shortage of meetings in Washington, D.C., where I'm from. And as you can see from my bio, I did a long stretch in our Navy. One of the officers who was just standing, in all probability, will be a crewman or a commanding officer of the Canadian Surface Combatant as it goes through its initial construction and build-out. So my approach to this is to ask, how does new technology impact that officer and his crew tactically, strategically? What are the benefits? What are the risks? We've seen from the other panelists and others during the conference that potential adversaries in the Asia Pacific are in fact trying to introduce disruptive tactics. The ballistic anti-ship missile is a perfect example. How do you focus technology in a surface vessel, for example, to deal with that kind of threat? We in the United States adopt an expensive brute force approach, one with which I was involved earlier in my career, and that's to launch another missile, go up and hit the darn thing. Is that the right answer? Do you deceive it, that being the threat target? Do you disrupt it with a directed energy weapon? Do you disrupt its targeting and launch early on with some new type of technology? All of these are things that can be used in this arena. But if you put yourself in a position for a moment, imagine that you have the watch. You're ready. And I know this will resonate with those of us in the audience who are former surface sailors. You're ready to go on watch. You're prepared, you're eager to do the nation's business in the long reaches of the Pacific and the long watches of the night. You've had your coffee. Quoting a famous U.S. naval officer, you have the knowledge to know what the right thing to do is in any situation. You have the integrity to do the right thing, and you've got the stamina to do it at 2 o'clock in the morning on the mid-watch. So what do we need from technology as we move forward? See if I can figure out. There we go. We need to be able to pace emerging technologies in new domains that are new to us. A perfect example is cyber warfare. Professor Vago talked about how he believes, and I agree, that it is a poor strategy to rely on cyber warfare as a means of replacing a larger fleet of ships and aircraft and capability. But that domain represents both a risk and an opportunity that I'll talk about on the next slide. And many of the new technologies that we've seen in Tai Ming's slides are prompting us to try and take these emerging threats on with limited acquisition and sustainment funding. Now I'm in the international business development business, and I haven't run across a customer who tells me that they have an unlimited checkbook. And even those countries that do have relatively good budget resources have other resource challenges, and it primarily comes back to the folks that I had stand up at the beginning, and that's the officers and sailors who are going to man their ships Even if you can identify the right technology, build the right ship, do you have the people? Can you train those people to do the mission with the technology that you have? Many navies, in my view, have adopted an approach where they try and build a less expensive vessel with modular capability. I noticed that that doesn't seem to be in the strategy for CSC, and I would tell you, as someone with history and with scars in the Littoral Combat Ship program, which is a modular approach, that approach is not without its risks, and I'll talk about a few of those. You have to have an integrated strategy. And as one of the speakers said yesterday, you have to understand what is your operational and strategic objective. How does that lead to the requirements that will be used as you formulate a new ship class? And have you integrated technology and the human aspect of operating that technology in with every bit of your thinking? I would like to point out, and Richard can attest to this, that I had these slides drafted before your CNO got up on the opening morning of the conference and talked about his visions. And you may recall I asked him a question about how he was going to address the challenge of getting a replacement crew ready to go out to one of his ships and take over the charge of operating that ship and meeting the threat. Remember that? Okay, and he talked about having an integrated system approach, and I couldn't agree more. My personal challenge with the U.S. Navy in using modularity was that while you get a more versatile platform in some respects, because you can take a mine hunter and you can change it into a corvette, a ship that is out there to do anti-surface warfare against the swarm threat that we face in many of the theaters where we operate, okay? So you can do that, but you sacrifice the multi-mission capability that many navies seek and cherish, including our own. The tactical and operational employment of a ship that has modular capability proved to be very interesting for us on Freedom's early deployments. Freedom is LCS-1, our first littoral combat ship. We thought we had an adequate, integrated, crew-centric strategy to train and prepare those folks. And in fact, we had a more sophisticated shore-based trainer for littoral combat ship than we built for a destroyer. That is, we could put the crew in a trainer that included both the pilot house and all the aspects of maneuvering the ship in communication internally with the Mission Control Center that would operate the combat systems. Those two trainers could talk to each other seamlessly. They weren't completely faithful to the layout of the ships, but they were pretty good on a budget of less than $10 million. That didn't prove to be as adequate as we had hoped. And so one of my lessons learned, quite frankly, is it's difficult to overestimate how much attention you have to pay to integrating your prospective crew with the new technology, with the new ship, and particularly in some manner that, to Professor Vago's themes, they can actually look at strategy and doctrine development. There is a difference between doctrine and strategy. Doctrine informed by strategy is what the crew needs in their hands to take the ship over the horizon and do sustained combat operations on deployment. So I would conclude with the crew's perspective. How do you approach what the right crew size is in a new platform that has new technologies associated with it? Crucially, if you expect in a modular design to be able to take a crew that has been doing anti-surface warfare one day, put them in the port, spend 3 or 4 days installing a bunch of mine warfare gear, and then send them out to hunt mines, if you don't think that that's a tough challenge that involves a broad understanding of strategy and an intimate understanding of the new technologies you're using to go find those mines, you're deluding yourself. Mine warfare is a perfect example. It's much easier to innovate the threat than it is the means to counter it. It's like anti-submarine warfare, only harder, because the targets are smaller, they hide on the bottom much better, and they generally don't make any noise. So that in particular, as one of the areas that I was responsible for in my last tour, proved to be a very difficult technological challenge. I made a comment here about off-board data analysis. One of the things that you tend to do with technology, and I think Richard would resonate with this, you put technological automations into a ship, and it got to the point where I was a guy that grew up with steam plants. And at the end of my career, I was building ships with propulsion plants where the operator on the bridge took his pencil and hit a touch screen, and a gas turbine engine started up. Not uncommon throughout commercial and naval fleets around the world now. You can use the data from those types of control systems through satellite links to do predictive analysis like our airlines do of when it's time to do maintenance on that engine. And that's all wonderful, but it has nothing to do with developing tactical proficiency, warfighting insight in the remaining officers and sailors that you have in the smaller crew on that ship. So my message to you is that you have to extend the technology that you're using for automation, for innovative warfighting systems. You have to get it into training, because as you get to a smaller crew, it's not anything but obvious that each of those crew members, each of those tactical officers is going to have more to do. He's got a broader view through better sensors and better intelligence of a bigger chunk of battle space. He's got different and new weapons to go address threats in that battle space. And as he looks around, he doesn't have 250 people in the crew. Maybe he's got 100. So great forethought in responding to technological change, I believe, is very important.